Have you ever stopped to wonder how certain relationships impact your life, whether they lift you up or quietly pull you down? So often we focus on the value of relationships in terms of companionship or support, but we may overlook the hidden costs of relationships that drain us. These costs are not always obvious, yet they can take a serious toll on our emotional well being or sense of self and even our life's purpose. In today's conversation, we're going to explore the hidden costs of negative relationships that I believe everybody should avoid. This discussion is about uncovering those subtle, often unseen effects and negative relationships can have on us. We'll start by bringing awareness to what these relationships look like, then dive into a deeper emotional, spiritual, and personal impact they can leave on your life. Finally, we'll work towards practical steps to protect ourselves and embrace relationships that truly serve our growth. So let's embark on this journey to learn, reflect, and ultimately make choices that foster a healthier, more fulfilling path forward. Now, the reason why I identified, last night conversation coming into this conversation, because I'm sure that there was some things that you guys added in the chats, and I do apologize because it was just the conversation was just so enriching. It was difficult for me to go back and forth. Um, and so, as it pertains to this conversation, I think that is a great segue to what we're going to discuss because at the end of the day, I mean, let's be completely honest. I think some of us are, most of us, have participated in in those relationships where we felt that they may have been toxic, whatever the case may be. So I want to ask you, just straight up, just gonna keep it real. What is a toxic relationship?
The one I'm in right now. No, seriously, but seriously, unhealthy relationships, toxic relationships, I believe, is something that's built on power and control. So they offer us insults and jealous accusations, maybe a little bit of yelling. My biggest one is criticism and pessimist. I don't even know how to say the word, but being a pessimist. Um, I think those toxic behaviors, especially criticism, can bring doubt or lead to doubt and actually make you start looking at yourself as if what that person is saying is fact or true, when really you have to go back and identify in this moment who you are and if that's indeed the case. So I think the negativity or the toxic relationships come, those identifiers come up when you first meet someone, but we think, oh, that'll pass. Maybe they're just having a bad day, and we don't pay attention to when they're actually criticizing, which can lead to further issues along the way in the relationship.
And to add to what Miss Levon said, um, if I had to give a simplistic definition of what is a toxic relationship, I would say that it is a relationship where each party brings um, their trauma and the things that they've endured in some experiences, and they try to place it on the other versus doing the work to help them be stronger and come together and create a healthy environment for them to grow and thrive in. I would say, in part, that would be my definition of what could be defined as a toxic relationship.
Now,
I
good.
just have a quick question for Lisa or and you.
Mhm.
So you said someone bringing their trauma. So actually, when we come into relationships, we're intentionally trauma bonding based on that statement. Is that what
No, that's not what I said. I said each
I didn't?
individual is responsible for their. I was saying each individual comes together and they have not done some of the work because we're all working. We're going to continue to work until we leave here, right? So when you don't intentionally do some of the work of some of the experiences that you have already had, and you come together thinking that the other person is going to be responsible for taking care of or fixing some of the trauma that you have had in your life, and you don't do the work yourself, then that can cause a toxic environment. Now, as I was saying earlier, we are going to come into a relationship. We're not going to be completely ready and perfect. There's only one person who already came, and he was perfect. And we're going to continue to work on ourselves. But to have the expectation that someone else is going to, because I've heard this so many times, you know, they're going to help me heal, um, or they're going to be my happiness or my peace, the other person. Well, that's something that we have to work on. We have to develop within ourselves and continue to grow and continue to heal. So no, not bonding with your trauma, but making sure that you address it and you acknowledge that it's there. Because if you don't, you're creating that toxic environment. You're thriving in it actually. Well, not thriving. It's going to deteriorate eventually. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I do like that question, Levon. And I think from her perspective of trauma bonding, it's kind of like two people connecting and they're each other's hero. Like, say, for example, I got something in my life that I've never healed from. And now I'm having an expectation for you to help me through it. And you actually do. So now there creates a dependency. And then vice versa, it works in return as well. So it becomes a cycle of like un unharmonized past experiences, emotions, pains, whatever the case may be, that I have a dependency on somebody else to kind of help me with. And then we go into that cycle and that creates a bond between the two people until one of them recognizes it and then decide they want to do something different in their life. Am I right by your, that's what you meant, correct?
Correct. Like you're coming in and like, oh, we have this in common. So absolutely, almost heroism.
Yeah,
It's really not. Mhm.
absolutely. So I love where you guys started, right? LeVon, you started off with control, yelling, pessimism, and I like the fact that you threw in fact or true. Yeah, I know that's where I like to hang my hat at. What is fact and what is true? And I think sometimes what we have to realize is that there's a difference between a fact and the truth. It Yes, it is a fact that this happened in your life, right? That is factual. When you tell me the story, it is true to you. It is a fact for you because we all have our own lens in which we view life. So it's like I will bring up a very unpopular conversation real quick and get off of it. Right? We know what happened a couple of weeks ago. It is a fact that that was the end state. Anything I add to that fact now becomes an opinion or an assumption if I don't have the relevant information. So sticking with the facts, that's the thing in which we run into issues with. Um, Control, yelling, and pessimism. I love that because at the end of the day, what we tend to do is we fight for control. If we don't believe it, the only thing you got to do is look around. That's what the elections was about. It's about control. Who can get the control of most of the voters, right? And they spend months trying to get that to happen. And I always inject to help people understand there is no such thing as control. It is an illusion. It always has been illusion. In fact, no one has control over you unless you give it to them. Once you give it to them, now they have it. The whole yelling thing, I get that because some people struggle in the space of their um, ability to regulate their own emotions, and therefore they revert back to a childhood state and start yelling at an adult as though them yelling and raising their voice is actually going to make that adult change their mind in any way whatsoever. Um, Pessimism, I like that. Can you kind of unpack that just a little bit? Because I really want us to understand exactly what you're saying when you say pessimism in the space of toxic relationships.
Okay, so I can give you an example. You come home from work. I've cooked. Food is good to me, but it's not spicy enough. It You overcook the rice. I don't like my vegetables. This doesn't taste like my mom's. Those are things that will get you no meals. Okay, so your criticism leads to me being pessimistic where you won't get anything.
Mm, I like
So
that. I like that. I would to add to what you're saying. I tend to say quite frequently there's a difference between a cynical mindset and having a cynical perspective, right? A cynical perspective allows me to question what I observe, and taken just as pure fact. Okay. But a cynical mindset has me to view everything through the lens of this person is out to get me. They have this mind, they have this thing, they're just trying to get over, they're trying to take advantage of me or whatever. So from a cynical mindset, you will always believe that the worst can actually happen. And as I'm listening to what you're saying, not saying that person had a cynical mindset, but I'm saying that at a certain point, because they questioned what you were doing or how you were doing it, whatever the case may be, it's easy to perceive that, oh, well, they're viewing me through the worst lens that they can actually put on when they see what it is that I'm doing. They're comparing me to somebody else they hold in high regard. And in essence, what they're saying is that, oh, I don't measure up. So, yeah, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. Criticism is huge. Okay, I can't stress that piece enough. Criticism is huge. There's two ways to look at it. Criticism is one in which I am extremely critical of the person, but then I can be critical of the behavior. They're not the same. A lot of times we conflate them as being the same. But then the other side of it is that I am just critical just for the simple fact of me being critical. And if I am just critical just for the simple fact of me being critical, that can become exhausting. So we got to be careful with that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. The voice of reason, you brought in the notion of trauma. If you don't mind, can you kind of help us to understand how can trauma by itself, how can it lead to or make a relationship be toxic by itself?
If we enter into anything, right, and we've all had our own experiences, but now we're going to be joining our lives together. So we enter into any environment and we bring some of the negative experiences that we've had, and we don't unpack them ourselves, or go speak to someone, go talk to someone, and try to understand, so that we can come into an environment and not just only add value to it, but the word of God tells us that we overcome by the words of our testimony. So if we come into an environment and we've already done some of the work that we need to do in order to add value to that environment, that is a more conducive environment for us to be in. But if we come into the environment and we bring all of the luggage, the suitcases and everything, and the house is going to be filled with all that luggage, and then it has not been unpacked. The clothes haven't been taken out and sorted and separated, so that we can actually see what's going on. We have to be able to um, deal with the trauma ourselves in part, because if we're realistic, we're going to always have a part of that experience with us, because it's always, we had it, you know. So we're going to have a part of that with us, but when that comes up, it's our responsibility to work on it, right? We can't not make it the other person's responsibility. They can support us, because being in an environment where you don't have support, one which Levon was talking about in part as well, can cause add toxicity to the environment. And so when we come together and we're not intentionally working on some of the things, and all of us have it, all of us have things we've dealt with, we're not working on it, so we can come together a more healed person, and then be able to deal with the things as they come up throughout our life. I think if I answered your question.
No, no, you did. No, no, you did, and I'm agreeing with you. I think we have to realize that everybody's going through something. What I went through for me is my responsibility. I don't have the right to put it on Levine, or I don't have the right to put it on Lisa. It is my responsibility to harmonize with the thing that I've been through. When we don't do that, what ends up happening is that we take that, like Lisa said, luggage. We will take that into the next space, the next situation, the next relationship, whatever that looks like, right? And then what we try to do is we attempt to carve out a space of comfort for me. And how dare you violate what I've carved out, or what I'm trying to carve out in the space of relationship that is for me, that makes me comfortable. So now, anytime the other person does something that can potentially kind of like remind me of the trauma that I've been through, now that person becomes the enemy. So we got to be careful with that. So I like the fact that you said, again, my trauma, my responsibility. I can't put it on anybody else. Once I intentionally put it on anybody else because they have accepted to be in the space of relationship with me, now I am robbing that person from being the best version of themselves that they could possibly be. And that kind of gets back to what you mentioned previously when it comes down to past projected experiences. Whatever took place in the past for me, that should stay in the past. Once I bring it to my future and I now project it on the other person because of what I experienced in the past, now they don't have room to breathe in it. Okay. And then I make it their responsibility ultimately when they weren't even a part of the process. So I think that is interesting as we say it. So I want to bring a couple of other things to the conversation as well, because I think we're about to uncover something. His divine appointment said, what makes the relationship toxic is the person creating an unhealthy space and press upon the other person their struggles. Absolutely. I had no idea that that was AI, by the way. Um, Adrian says toxic relationships are relationships with people who have the same traumas and unhealed traits that you have. It's fire and dynamite combined. Okay, I like that as well. Miss Teresa Austin says emotional abuse, disrespect, gaslighting, jealousy, control, and lack of support are some of the things that make, or some that makes a relationship toxic. I love it. I love it. I love it. Disrespecting your boundaries, ignoring your limits to push you to do things you're uncomfortable with. Actually, that sounds more like growth, but that's okay. Except the part about disrespecting boundaries. Broken people try to break down other people instead of working on them. Very interesting. I love it. Another one is low self esteem, feeling insecure and unworthy. Okay,
I have another question I want to
sure.
ask. So, in the process of us becoming one, right? And we have these two individuals coming together to become one, and they do come into the relationship with some toxic behaviors, right?
Hmm.
And we're talking about reframing the images based
Hmm.
on based on the relationships that we have experienced in our lifetime, our
Hmm.
generation. I'll say our generation.
Sure.
Um, so what is the best advice that we can share when people are thinking? So if I'm coming into a relationship and I'm supposed to do my work, how do I do that when I'm becoming one, or I'm already in a relationship? So I'm just asking the question.
Pin that to the wall for right now.
Okay.
We're gonna get there. It's a little
Okay.
too soon to get into that,
All right.
because if we do that right now, then the
No.
problem becomes no one ever understands the why. You
Okay.
see what I'm saying? It's just like going to social media and hearing somebody talk about this thing, this thing, this thing, and then grab that as just raw information. And then really ultimately moving forward, it equates to nothing. It's just raw information. Now, getting back to everything we just talked about, we talked about control, yelling, pessimism, trauma, past experiences. We talked about, creating unhealthy spaces and press upon the other person your struggle. We talked about, I got to build this again, by the way. We talked about toxic relationship or relationships with people who have the same trauma and unhealed traits that you have. It's fire and dynamite combined. We talked about emotional abuse, disrespect, gaslighting, jealousy, control, and lack of support are some of the things that makes relationship toxic. We talked about all of those to include self-esteem, low self-esteem, and feeling insecure and unworthy. Is those things relationship focused, or was everything we just talked about behavior?
Everything that we just talked about was behavior, and it sounds like more so relationships with ourselves individually,
Mm.
not together or as a unit.
I think you're spot on. I think you hit the point that I was getting at. I think too many times we take a thing and something else and put it together and say that's what it is. That is a false assertion. Here's why I say that. I give you a perfect example. Toxic leadership. Just the idea of leadership by itself is not toxic, right? Nor is it the opposite of toxic. It is simply leadership. But when I add an adjective in front of it and say it's toxic leadership, well, what am I trying to get you to do? I'm trying to get you to understand that this person's leadership abilities is detrimental to the environment. Wait, no. This person has behavior that is detrimental to the mantle of leadership. So when we look at it from that perspective, it's more so of saying, like, if we can get out of the mind of toxic relationship and say that relationship by itself is an environment, and in the space of an environment, two people can come together. And relationship makes it possible to get after what you just asked me. It makes it possible for these two people to become one. But the only way that they can become one is put their own selfish needs, no pun intended, by the way, put their own selfish needs aside. I love y'all. Um, and recognize that the space of relationship requires me to give. If the space of relationship requires me to give, then where does control come from? Why am I yelling? Where does pessimism come from? Where does my past perceived traumas now become current, uh, traumatic situations in the space of relationship that we're trying to create? How can, if that, what everything I just said is true, how can, you know, trauma and unhealed traits become fire and dynamic? How can it become an unhealthy space when the creator of relationships said that it is nothing but health, it is nothing but thriving, it's nothing but growth, therefore it can't be unhealthy. So it has to be the things that we bring into that space that kind of taints the ability of what it is designed to do. Am I making sense, or am I, in left field, hopeful, flying on Aladdin's castle? I mean, Aladdin's rug. What do you guys think?
I think that you're spot on. I think we languish in um, all of the things that happened in the past. And even if something happens today that may remind you of something then, which is a trigger, um, all of a sudden it asserts in your own mind that, oh, she's just like them, or he's just like them, or so absolutely. I think that you're spot on, and we just continuously keep reliving, and it keeps recycling because we don't do the work previously.
I was just thinking as you were saying that this scenario came to mind. So I was thinking about the process of the children of Israel. And God said, "You are my people and I'm your God." And they're in relationship, right? And they asked him, prayed for him to come in and deliver them. And he did. And he showed himself to him. And he said, "We're in relationship now." But when they got to the point where it got a little bit difficult on the journey, they wanted to go back to where they asked him to deliver them from. And so now he's like, "Well, you've seen all the things that we've done together in this relationship, and now you want to go back, and now you want to continue to be disobedient because you don't like the process of this relationship." And so it just reminded me of that when I heard you talking. That's what came to mind. In relationship, that there are going to be some things that we're going to endure together, right? And our focus has to be, as we always say in our community, the relationship. And so when we don't focus on that, then we think about how uncomfortable it is in this time, in this season. Well, that's not going to benefit us individually, but if we come together and we focus on the relationship, then we can grow, continue to grow, and we can continue to be better together in relationship.
Yeah. Now, I'm agreeing with everything you guys said, and that's one of the reasons why I coined the phrase that the most important person in the relationship is the relationship itself. Because at the end of the day, if I go into the relationship thinking it's all about me, 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 and me, what have you done for me lately, according to the prophet Janet Jackson, like all of that other stuff, then what ends up happening is that I am trying to make me the center of this universe, the universe that exists between me and you. And whenever I do that, now you are subject to how I feel your performance shows up in the space of relationship. So now I have not only changed the dynamics of what relationship is supposed to be, but I have also changed what you were called to do in a relationship. You were called to serve relationship, but I am trying to make you serve me. That's backwards. And because it's that way, it is guaranteed to fail. And then what happens is if that relationship fails, now we get out of the relationship and we demonize the person that we left simply because they did not serve me. Now, who's the toxic one? I mean, I'm just saying, because who am I to tell anyone else that, and I just use you two, that the voice of reason or the love doctor is anything less than a child of God. I don't have that right. I don't have that authority. And if I don't have that right and I don't have that authority, the minute that I do, I am now going against that which is righteous. And if I am going against that which is righteous, now I become a weed. So we got to be careful with the words that we use and taking on. And this is why you keep hearing me say it, going and just listening to anybody on social media and taking what they say as though it's the doctrine or the gospel. It is not. It is all, again, it is all deceptive techniques that are put out there so that it keeps us confused. But being an objective observer of facts is never that. So I can look at your behavior and give you feedback, kind of like what we talked about last night. Give you feedback on what I observe based upon your behavior, and you should be at an emotional space to where you can accept that feedback without assuming that that feedback is an attack on your being or your character. Sounds like moving in the direction of healthy relationship. Y'all just nodding y'all head up and down. So I don't know if y'all. What are y'all thinking?
My first thought that came to me is, you would love to move in that direction, and so you stop taking the things personal and you become congenial. However, and let's just say everything is peaceful, and then all of a sudden you hit with a gut punch, and everything is no longer peaceful in the matter of a day, an hour, or a second. So how do you deal with that? Because the stress and the anxiety, emotional uncertainty and unsafety becomes a issue then.
I Number one, I love that question. And I think my response is going to be a little long, but just kind of humor me for a second as I get there, because there's a lot of unknowns in that question. And I don't want to ask the specifics of everything in that, but I'm just going to try to piece it together as we go along. If everything is peaceful, and then next thing you know, as older folks will say, somebody flips and they lose their cool, they lose their temper, and then they start yelling. And I'm just going to use that as an example. They start yelling, whatever that looks like. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. They start yelling, so forth and so on. Well, that happened. How much of them yelling can I control? None, absolutely. But what can I control? I can control my response to it. So now, in the midst of them yelling, I have a responsibility to take an inventory of how does that make me feel. Once I take an inventory of how does that make me feel, now once I acknowledge that, now why did this person yelling at me make me feel that way? Right now, I got it. There's a side of us say, look, man, look, hey, cuz, first and foremost, you're gonna be coming at me sideways. I get that part, but let's keep that person aside, because that's the immature side of who we are. Let's just be completely transparent. That's not who we were called to be. And every time that person want to come up and defend, no, that's not necessary in this space, because they ain't put their hands on me, anything of that nature, right? So now I have to take inventory, I have to assess, and then I have to ask myself why. Why does this person yelling at me make me feel a particular type of way? If I can do that, then I recognize my own responsibility. I don't have a responsibility to them yelling, but because of relationship, I have a responsibility at a later point in time to let them know. Say, hey, did you realize that whenever things don't necessarily go your way, you have an additional octave that you tend to add to the conversation, right? Because if I attempt to do it right then and there while they're yelling, guess what that's going to make them do? Go a step higher. They're going to elevate their pitch. They're singing the best song they got right now, right? so that's what I say. It is always a space of personal responsibility. Relationship is all about how I show up in it. Remember, relationship is a space, an environment. When I show up in it, my responsibility is to serve relationship. You become the recipient of my service to relationship. If I can do that, if I can remember that, if I can process that in real time, especially when you yelling, my temperature raised, my heart start, palpitating, that's the indicator. That is a sign of some things in me I need to work on, not so much as a sign of them. Because let's just be honest, I've known you since 1982. I'm just exaggerating at that point. I've known you since 1982. If I've known you since 1982 and you have never shown any aggressive posture before me, you ain't never put your hands on me, you ain't never had me pinned against the wall by my throat, anything, why am I assuming that to be now? So fight or flight is not the answer to what some people will believe and say that that's what it is. Oh, that's your fight or flight mechanism. No, this person has never presented that to me to where I needed to fight or flight. So to say that and bring that to the conversation, that's an assumption. But what isn't an assumption is the fact of how I actually feel, right? That's the thing I need to process. Don't make an assumption to give myself an excuse to escape the responsibility that relationship is now presenting to me. When I do that, I never do the work on myself. And then what ends up happening, I leave this relationship, go to the next relationship. And then the first time somebody shows that they're human by expressing themselves emotionally, which probably is what that person was actually doing, just didn't realize to what extent. So if you express yourself emotionally, now I automatically assume fight or flight, I'm out. And then I go a bounce like a frog on a lily pad. I go from this one to this one to this one to this one with the same thing that may have stemmed from childhood, that may have stemmed from past relationships, it may have stemmed from bad information I received. All of those things can be possible. Last thing I want to say in response to that question, you hear it a lot that you have to be, you have to create a safe space for somebody to exist in. Am I the only person that heard that? Have you guys heard that before? Okay, great. And you hear it all over social media. You have to create a safe space for someone else to exist in. Wrong. That is totally wrong. That is error. And when people tell you that, it is setting the conditions for you to be a doormat for the other person who at any given point in time can tell you that you're unsafe. In reality, if you recognize and do it right, you must become a safe space so that when you show up to a relationship, I don't need you to create a safe space for me. I am safety arriving. If you have the ability to do that, you too become safety arriving. And now you got two safe spaces in the space of relationship, which makes the entire relationship safe, even though relationship by itself, by its very nature, is safe. So now that becomes the other part. So like I said, a long-winded response, but I hope I responded to your question.
Indeed, you did. So I have one small question then.
Sure.
So, what if there is no emotional response or trigger within me except for the response, the mental response? This person is batshit crazy. Excuse the expression.
Which one? The person with no emotional response or the other person?
The other person.
Okay.
You know, you're looking at them, you kind of looking at them out the corner of your eye and you just shake your head and walk away because that's the thought. Is that an inappropriate thought for oneself, being that I need to look at me?
I am slow to call it appropriate or inappropriate, but here's what I will say. Personal responsibility is always the thing, okay? The other part of it, no response, no emotional response. I understand what you mean when you say emotional response, but let's look at a different type of emotion instead of, aggression or postured for defense or whatever the case may be. What about concern? Concern can be an emotional response, right? Care can be an emotional response. So I don't have to become a Roman soldier in the face of aggression and then say something wrong with you. Yeah, I don't have to do that, right? I can become a human in the space of humanity and say, okay, can you help me to understand why this was necessary? Because I really want to understand. I'm not trying to be aggressive. I really just want to know. I don't know what just happened. So now I've softened the environment, right? They can still be aggressive as they want to, but my soft environment should allow them to come back down. That's really one of the techniques that you use to bring people down, because of course you already know that when emotions are high, cognition is low. So as long as they're up here, they're not thinking, they're reacting. So once my response comes to them in a soft manner, that gives them the opportunity to come back down if they so choose to. Now, some people, don't get me wrong, don't get it wrong. Some people know what you're doing and they're going to crank it up another notch. In that space, say, hey, you know what? I need about 10 minutes. Like, let's walk away from this. 10 minutes, and then let's come back to it and re-engage because I'm a little concerned right now. So I think that's the way I want to go instead of saying appropriate versus inappropriate, sociopath, narcissist, all that other stuff that you hear in the digisphere today, which no one at I'm I'm a I'm gonna preserve my comment for that. But anyway, that's kind of like how I want to respond to that. Did I answer your question? Did it make sense, or did I leave any gray areas in there?
No, you didn't. You even cleaned up the BSC.
Love the acronyms. Lisa Keys, your thoughts, your response.
No, as I was listening to your question, I thought about the trauma. I mean, the toxic environment that we talked about, right? And in our response, that we have to the way we have to respond in that environment. And so that is us still dealing with someone else's perceived, we don't know, trauma. And so then the onus is still on us, the individual, right? Because we're in that environment. And so the onus is still on us to say, okay, if you're in the environment and that is something that's happening in your environment, like you said, I like the process that you use. Sometimes you just need to take a moment and say, let me take a few seconds, let me step away, and then I'll come back and I want to talk to you because you understand that this is not the reason why the person is blowing up or yelling or whatever the case may be, but it's something else. And you do want to make sure that you can have a conversation and talk about it so that you guys can come to a form of unity, harmony. And so I think that I find it interesting as I'm learning about relationships that it's always the individuals, no matter what we do, no matter how we answer the question, ask the question, it's always the individual's responsibility to respond in those environments, in the environment, always.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what to me is interesting because, like you said, it's still are going to be our responsibility in the relationship to make sure that we can create harmony if possible. And if not, then what is the other option that we have?
Yeah, I agree, and there were. I know I went through my answer, and my answer was kind of long, but then there was a lot of things I left out because there's always another side of it as well, right? Even in the space of perceived aggression, I also need to understand when I ask myself some questions, like what that is it anything that I did that kind of provoked this? Because let's just be honest, I'm a full grown man. All my kids grown. I ain't got time to raise no other kids. So at the end of the day, do I find myself talking to you about the same thing more than once? Are we having the same conversations repetitively, things of that nature? That's enough to like make anybody upset, right? They're human. So I think that is also a thing. I don't and just being transparent, I did that last time. I did not entertain the other side of it, and I owed that brother an apology. So I want to make sure that I am entertaining it from both sides today. It's not just one side, there's always another side of the coin. There's always a side to a person that's trying to help you with the thing, and you're rejecting the help and holding on to what you already know, and then coming back with the same problem. Well, I'm just being honest. In the space of coaching, we at that point we tend to sever the relationship because you're not keeping up your end of the bargain. But it's called a coaching relationship. If you go to work, you get a job, you have a job description, you're supposed to do that job description. If you don't do what the job description say, the employee, the employer has the option to sever the relationship with the employee. So why and where did we get this notion that, hey, in the space of relationship, I get to do whatever it is I want to do, and at the end of the day, I have no fear of retribution whatsoever? It's entitlement. And so what we have to do is recognize our own internal aspects of entitlement in every aspect of every moment when it comes down to relationship. That's why I love the conversation about calibration, because calibration allows you to come to the table and share information before before the behavior gets to the point that it becomes detriment to the relationship. So I want to make sure I'm saying that, because there are certain times where you get into relationships with people and then you learn this afterwards. And then learning this afterwards, you attempt to say, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And be like, no, it's fine just the way it is. No, it's not fine. I've just been keeping it to myself all this time. So I think those things are actually true. And I think if we don't address those, then we're missing a big piece. So, how can you tell if a relationship or the relationship environment or the other person in the relationship is negatively impacting your well being?
Constant stress and anxiety, I would say, are the ones that plague myself. I think that there's others, where you see an erosion in self worth, um, and the loss of emotional safety or security within the relationship. Not feeling safe, not feeling as though that you can talk to that person at all, because it leads to, and it impacts the whole situation, and then you walk away, either frustrated, annoyed, stressed, sad, angry, or any of the other emotions you can possibly think of.
Okay. So, and I just want to make sure when you say not feeling like you can't talk to that person, um, I think I think we need to kind of unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind, because I think sometimes some people hear that and they think it's a total absolute thing, but then other people hear it say, "No, you just don't like the way I talk to you. You don't like the fact that I'm being honest and truthful. Therefore, you feel that you can't." So, what is your response to that?
My response to that is, I literally avoid you, not because I can't stand what you're saying. It's just that you don't seem to be able to have a conversation. It's always what you want, how you think it should look. It's still an I thing and not a we thing when I'm saying that this is a problem.
You realize that's the exact same thing,
Exactly, I
right?
do when I said it.
Yeah, and that's why I asked this question because I hear it all the time on both sides. I can't talk to this person, but this person just feel that they can't talk to me because I don't talk in the way that they want me to talk. I don't talk in the flowers and rainbows and all of that other stuff. They want me to talk that way. I'm not going to recondition my conversation to appease how they feel about what it is that I'm saying.
Well, you can't really argue with the truth. So I can take what you say, you know what I'm saying, as far as when it's the truth, but when you're being disrespectful or bashing, or uh, a cynic, or even criticizing, who is, if it's good criticism, is one thing, but your criticism is a habit, that's a whole different thing. So it still is the same thing. So I guess the my question to that question is, so how do I fix that where I'm in compliance, if you will?
So how do I fix that? I'm gonna pin that for a second, and I want to
Okay.
give Lisa an opportunity to respond to this.
I guess I heard you say you wouldn't recondition the way that you communicate with the person because they don't like how you communicate. Right. And if they're communicating, I guess, and saying that, you know, um, saying that, maybe they're trying to understand how you're communicating, I guess. And I think that's all a part of us learning to effectively communicate together. So, and for us to become one, right? We're
Mhm.
still identifying the individual's behavior or how they communicate, but then there are going to be some things that we have to adjust as well in relationship. And so that's why I was like, I think everyone is going to, we're going to have to and we're coming together and we're growing toward being one. We all have to make some of those adjustments
Sure.
is what I was thinking when I was hearing you respond. And so that was my that's why I say I was thinking it, but it came out of my mouth. um we all have a responsibility in relationship to grow and come together. As long as we're doing it and we're doing it based off of the guidelines that were given to us to be in relationship, I think that we're going to have to make some concessions as well. Not compromise what the word of God is telling us to do and how to be in relationship with each other. And and not change the dynamic of the relationship or anyone's boundaries, but at least learn to come together and work together. I guess that was my thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, it's you hear it all the time on both sides. And I was just giving an opposing example on what that looks like. I think you're absolutely right, and um, I agree with Jay. I think if I say your name, and I apologize, please forgive me. Ja, I think that's how you say your name, Ja Parson. I agree wholeheartedly. There has to be a root cause of the disagreement. And if we can't find the root cause of it, then the only thing we're doing is jousting back and forth about a surface level conversation. So that's the whole point behind all of it. But going back to the original question, I like where Levon went. Like when you start identifying stressors, and it's not saying that all stress is bad, right? Let's start there. You start identifying stressors, and I would go with more long term stressors as opposed to just something that causes a stressful moment, right? If you find that it has long term stress within the space of that relationship, now it wants us to consider why that actually happened. Lisa, are there any other um, ways to identify the negative impact of your well being in relationship?
I would say yes. When and Levon has talked about some of them. I mean, you shut down. You don't even communicate anymore. It's like we are you you're quiet. I used to think that when I was um experiencing some of those negativities in my relationship, that if I just didn't say nothing, if I was just silent, that it would correct itself. Right? Of course,
Hmm.
I was much younger, didn't understand, but silence being silenced in a toxic environment is not a healthy environment at all. And those are some of the things that can affect your health. Thank you for joining, Jairus. um, but those are some of the things that can affect your health and your mental state as well. And so it's so important for us to make sure that um, we are being mindful of our health. We're being mindful of our thoughts, because there's those um, and the way that we react in those environments as well, because we don't want to respond in kind, because that does not help the environment, but it can affect you because you have these thoughts in your mind. Like if you're living in a toxic environment or a negative environment, you have these thoughts and you got to go pray, so that you won't respond to them, because you need to be able to make sure that you don't continue to contribute to the environment. So the way that it impacts you is it impacts the way you communicate with each other. It impacts your health, overall health. It impacts your even all the relationships around you, not just the ones you having with that individual, but with your children, with your friends. It impacts every aspect of your relationships.
Okay. So now I'm hearing something that is the same and different at the same time, and I like the difference in it, because the difference in it, what I heard you say, is that you can see it in your behavior, your external behavior. Oh, not external, in your behavior in external relationships. So now that relationship is spilling over into my work environment. It is spilling over to how I treat my family. It is spilling over to how I treat my friends and things of that nature. I think that is a very huge point. Although I'm agreeing with both. I'm not saying LeBron's point was any less huge or less important, but that long term stress that she was talking about now has a prolonged effect because it's affecting my surroundings and so forth and so on. So I think that's key. I will go back though and say the stonewalling, the shutting down, right? Stonewalling. Let's stop saying shutting down. Stonewalling, which is one of the identifiers of a divorce predictor. I'm just gonna call it spade a spade. When a person shuts down, even though we thought or felt it was the right thing to do, it is not. Right? We have to be in a space to where we can express how we're currently feeling based upon what is actually happening. Right? And do it to such a degree that you don't necessarily pin the other person to the wall. Okay. Just help them to understand that, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel right. And the reason why it makes me feel this way, and because we're believers, we always go back to the word. So if I make it about my raw, pure emotions, there is nothing tangible that I can associate it with. Root cause, right? But When you do this thing, it makes me feel this. And you and I, we've been studying the word, and the word says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, you can get mad at me expressing myself all you want to, but you're not getting mad at me expressing myself. You're really getting mad at what the word says, and you not being in compliance with what the word says. That's the point of emphasis now in this conversation. And if I am that partner, like we say, becoming one, now it's like, how can I help you to go from here to where the word is at? Now, trust me, I understand that's a tall task for some people to do because, we want to put them gloves on and throw them blows, right? But sometimes we got to pull punches like Mike Tyson, man. Listen, y'all understand what that look like. You ain't got to fight all the time. Stop it. That's really what it's all about. It is all about us getting to the point of becoming one. And we'll never become one if we keep showing ourselves up as adversaries. Okay. So don't just express the raw emotion, express the emotions and why. If you're just expressing the raw emotions, I can't do nothing with that. I got it. But then again, you're still asking me to be elevated. Express the emotions and why. Now, when you give me the why, that gives me something to hang on to. And if you can do that, now that gives us a way to move forward, especially going back to the thing that we talked about with calibration. So thank you for that.
Can I add,
Sure.
to that as well?
Absolutely.
It's so important. Now, if anyone is listening, like what Coach said about stonewalling and being silent, it's so important that we don't do that. If we don't have the words or don't know how to communicate it, I would say get someone who you can counsel, or someone who you can talk to help you navigate how to do that. Because I didn't know how to do it. Honestly, I was doing it because that's all I knew to do. But I'm talking about several years ago, but it took a lot of work to get here, and I'm still working. So if it's something that you're doing, talk to someone. Don't just sit in it, because it's toxic, internally toxic for you to not say anything and just be quiet and not really address what's going on in your environment.
Great point. Great point. And before we move on to the next question, I want to kind of address something because I've seen self-esteem a couple of times today. We got to understand what we're talking about when we say self-esteem, right? You have an identity and you have a concept as it pertains to yourself, right? So your concept literally drives your identity. Your identity drives your esteem, and your esteem shows up how you shows. Your esteem is how you show up in a social setting. I think too many times what we'll say is that, well, the voice of reason, she destroyed my self-esteem. So what am I really saying when I say that? What I'm saying is that she denounced my identity. Therefore, I couldn't express myself to how I see myself. Well, I get what that person is saying, but in all actuality, all of us is growing in identity. We have to understand that we were created in his image after his likeness, and you don't necessarily know 100% of what that looks like. So when we say certain things, I know who I am. We're only lying to ourselves and lying to everybody else because I want you to accept me as who I am, which is another big lie. So we're growing in identity. Okay. If I am growing in identity, there's a large probability that I'm going to learn more about myself as the days progress. As the old what is it, soap opera goes, these are the days of our lives. Yeah, the days of our lives will reveal some things to us about ourselves, right? So now I learn better and more how to express myself. So the more I learn about Christ, the more I strive to be like Christ, the more I try to let this mind be in you, the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, my expressions look different. Well, part of that information that I'm learning is the information that I receive from external sources. So everything that denounces who you think you are is not bad. I want to say that again. Everything that helps you to denounce who you think you are is not bad. I am not a African American male from the southeastern region of the United States. That's the lowest part of my identity. I am first spirit. Once I recognize that and accept that, that becomes my core identity. I express myself as an African American male born and raised in the southeastern portion of the United States. But what we want to do is we want to make that portion the first version of who you meet. I don't want you to meet that person first. In fact, if I do it correctly, you should not even process that person first. You should process the fact that, hey, he views me as equal. He views me as a person. He views me as this. not your skin color, not your hair color, not your height, not your none of that stuff. All of that stuff is smoke and mirrors, and we try to make that the primary thing and not the alternate thing. So I wanted to say that going forward because a lot of times that's where we get our esteem from. We get our esteem from our external features. This is who I am. This is how I look. This is what my family does. Nobody cares. This is what my education is. Nobody cares. At the end of the day, can you humble yourself like Christ had to do so that he can serve the people? That's the thing that people tie themselves to. So I just wanted to say that. As I get into the understanding of emotional and spiritual costs when it comes to these relationships, in what ways do you think these relationships might hinder your personal and or spiritual growth?
I thought of it. I always got to have a scripture for you, but I thought about the being in it, choosing to be in an environment. Um, there is a text in First Corinthians, I think, chapter 7, that says that the unbelieving wife can sanctify the unbelieving husband, and unbelieving husband can sanctify the unbelieving wife. And I think that process is there because we do enter into relationships and without taking the time to get to know each other and understand that if we are walking together. And so when you have to go through that process of of sanctifying the other, there's a lot of trauma in that environment as well, I believe, because you guys are not walking together, so you're not agreeing, right? And so that can hinder your personal and spiritual growth, even though that's the time when you have to make sure that um, you are dialed in into that relationship and into your relationship with God, so you continue to be effective in the relationship that we have with each other. So um, I think having to do in relationship, having to do the additional work for not only yourself but for your other partner because of observed behavior, that can be a great impact and hindrance on your spiritual growth.
Um, I would I would have to say something that I mentioned previously. It diminishes your self worth is one of the things I would say. Um, your sense of self, for lack of a better term, or the sense of self confidence, because then you might develop patterns of um, the same behavior, criticism or belittling, and even manipulation. One of the ones that I remember for myself when I was in a very, very toxic relationship was my lack of autonomy and my decision to remove myself from the presence of my family to either A, not hear what they had to say about the relationship, or be having to thinking that I had to defend myself for the situation, which then further led me to remove myself from the face of the Most High. Prayer became non existent because why did you put me in this position in the first place? Not really being accountable for my own actions of going into the relationship haphazardly, not paying attention to the signs that were definitely there previous. So the blame game starts. And I think that it hinders my personal and my spiritual growth because I stopped looking at myself and I started looking at everything on the outside.
I um I love what both of you are saying. Um, for me, it's not so much as well. Let me back up. I will say for me, it was personal growth that led to spiritual growth, and then spiritual growth enhances personal growth. Because in the beginning, I did not know how to grow spiritually, and it surely wasn't going to church. Let's cast that demon out before we get started. Not that I'm demonizing church, but trust me, I think all of us have had experiences to where only thing you're doing is recycling the information, and there's very too little growth happening inside that building. The growth must happen inside of you. And if I stand before you and I'm teaching you and I'm instructing you, and I don't see growth happening in you, I should do some work on me because I am the issue, not the Father, and definitely not you. I am the vessel. So the issue, the thing has to become where I can remove myself completely from it so that I can be the vessel for his love, his peace, his mercy, his kindness, all that to come to and through me to you. I say that because at the end of the day, in a relationship, that's how it's supposed to happen. As a man, that's what I'm called to do in the space of the relationship for my wife and my children. As a wife, that's what you're called to do in the space of relationship for your husband and your children. As a child, you're called to obey. You learn how to become a vessel from your parents, not just one, both of them. Let me say it again, not just one, both of them. Therefore, if I am in a space to where I am not teaching that message, what am I really doing? Am I catering to the title or am I catering to the word? Because if we're not completely transparent and honest with ourselves, like I can't fix it. I have to diagnose it. It has to have a name, right? If it had, what is your name? We are Legion. It has to have a name. Once we get a name for it, now don't stop laughing at me. So, once we get a name for it, now we can cast it out. Because if I can't do that, it's going to linger because I never identified it. So when you look at it, in what ways do you think these relationships might hinder your personal growth? Huge ways, because it is not fertilizing your personal growth. It is not fertilizing your spiritual growth. It has to, the concept of becoming one is real. You can't be in a marriage and avoid the notion of becoming one. Your marriage, if I am being completely transparent, is more cosmetic than anything, because you're not the one. Going back to the example that I gave earlier, like once you identify where this person struggled, like you shared how you feel, you compare it to the scriptures, and this person here, now what you do is you now help them to get to it. That's what becoming one is all about. We become accountability partners to each other. So when we are no longer accountability partners to one another, now we got an issue. If you're not helping me grow, if you're not helping me carry this water, if you're not doing this thing, then what are we doing? If I am not speaking into you, if I'm not teaching you, if I'm not lifting you up according to the word, if we are not having that type of environment, then what are we doing? So if we can clearly see that these things aren't happening, this is a very important time for us to sit down and have conversation with ourselves, honestly and openly, so that we can find out where the disconnect is. Your thoughts?
Um, I agree with having the honest and open conversations. Um, but I also have experienced something totally different than that, and everyone is just not capable of being mature, including myself at times. So um, I'm just really trying to absorb what you're saying. I have a few notes here that I'm leaving with it
Sure.
because I'm really trying to get the. I know how to be in relationship with me and the Most High. That's never the problem. It's being in relationships with others that sometimes can be the problem. So I really want to hear Lisa's response because I don't necessarily know how to articulate the response that I have for that statement or question.
I'm sorry, Coach. Can you restate that just so I can make sure that I'm clear?
And
No,
what?
just this. Okay.
Yeah.
I think on the other side of this, when we talked about recalibration last night, is so very imperative and something that Jay Parson put in here as well. Going back and doing the reassessing, coming together and us saying, okay, we need to come down, we need to sit down, we need to come together, and we need to take inventory so that we can come back and be on one accord. That's part of the calibration that we talked about last night, that we have to do in relationship, especially if we see that it's um, causing us some stress, in our relationship.
Hmm.
That's part of the work that we have to do. Um, and if it's hindering us from growing, who wants to be in an environment where you're being hindered, and personally or spiritually, who wants to be in that environment? So then we have to figure out, how did this environment happen? What happened in this environment? What caused it to be this way? You know, I know I was married for 28 years. I don't tell them my age, but being in an environment where it was toxic, where you're walking by each other in the house and not talking to each other, and or one sleeping upstairs, the other sleeping downstairs. It's not a place that you want to be in. And so if you don't take the time to say, okay, this is not a good, and that came from, I'm going to be transparent here, where some of me being silent, stonewalling, because I wasn't communicating. I just shut all the way down. And that's me owning my part of it, because that's the only part I can talk about at this particular point in my life. And so it's understanding that that's not an environment. He said, I came that you would have life and have life more abundantly. That's not abundant. And you can't thrive and you can't grow in that environment. And that's all I could add to that.
Yeah, I get that, and I love the point about each person having to go to the Father and ask for healing in their areas of weakness. But I'm just being transparent. Most, I don't mean for this to sound any particular type of way.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have the relationship they think they got with him, because at the end of the day, they don't necessarily digest, read, or even absorb any version of his word. They have this.
Form of godliness. I'm sorry.
I wasn't gonna go there though, but they have this kind of like fairy tale-ish relationship with God that does not line up with His Word. So it's very impossible for them to go to God and say, "Hey, I need healing from a thing that you've not even like." It's in His Word. His Word says this. So if His Word says this, and you're still trying to hold on to the thing that the Word says to relinquish, then you go to Him and say, "Hey, I need you to help me with this thing." But at the end of the day, why am I going to help you with something I already told you to let go, and you're still holding on to it? Why is that countenance low?
Mm. Mm.
That's I mean, and I like the fact that she said that, and what I said isn't against her. It's in compliance with what she is saying. If you have a relationship where both of you had a relationship with the Most High prior to, when you come together, hopefully you assumed what the scripture says after that. Because now he becomes the one that makes sure that the family moves in the direction of him, and he is the one that's ultimately accountable. Listen, that's a hard that is a huge pill for any man to swallow. So they should not be rushing into relationships like, "Hey, I want to go with you. You look good." No, 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 no. Back up, bro. You got to do some work on self first. You got to. Are you ready for that responsibility? That's the thing. And let's just be completely transparent. And I like the fact that you share your story. A lot of us wasn't taught that in the beginning. A lot of men weren't taught that in the beginning. A lot of women weren't taught, say, "Hey, before you decide to tie yourself down with a man, you need to be able to identify in that man that he is chasing Christ. If he chasing you and not chasing Christ, run the other way and make him keep chasing. Don't stop. Keep running. I don't care how much he holler. Keep running because he ain't ready." I'm just keeping it real. Like, that's not something that is taught at a young age. And most of us don't learn it until we get older. And here's the sad part about it. When I say most of us don't learn it, I'm not saying that a majority of us have learned it. There's a lot of us, who have not learned it, and they're still walking around here behaving like they're 20 years old. Oh, I can get my hair, my nails, I'm look good. I'm not.
Going to the gym to get my muscles up, get my
yeah. You know what I'm saying? I got the latest kicks, my drip. I'm like, what is a drip? My son, I promise y'all, my son had to explain it to me. I didn't know what a drip was. I look, what's the inside of it? Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is why I love these conversations, because it impacts some things and it helps you to consider some things that you may not be considering. I'm sorry, Miss Levon.
No, you're good.
I just was gonna say I'm grateful to not have an orange jumpsuit on my jacket cover.
What's the orange? What's the orange? Oh, okay, I got you. My bad. I was a little slow on the uptake. I get it now. I'm glad you were custom fitted for that jumpsuit too. Listen, y'all are awesome. Because of time, I gotta jump down because time has ran away from us. Great conversation. Listen, I greatly appreciate you guys. Wherever you are, go ahead and hit the like button. Again, leave your comments, leave your questions. That's what we're here for. That's why we do what we do. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that this is value added. So I'm gonna jump all the way down to the last one because I think this is, to me, it's the money making. I owe y'all an apology. I'm a little slow in getting my product out, but it's coming. I promise y'all, it's coming. Creating boundaries and moving forward with intentional relationships. So what boundaries can you create to protect yourself from the hidden costs of negative relationships? And trust me when I tell y'all, it's a lot more that we could have unpacked during this particular conversation.
And this one right here is a jam-packed one right here. This question right here.
That's why I put it up there.
What boundaries can you create to protect yourself from the hidden cost of negative relationships? The one that I have to always go back to, because this is my constant. If I don't have the instructions and I don't know how to be in relationship, because they are in the word, even though people say I don't have a manual to be in relationships. We really do. There's an example set for us already. If you go through and you read it, it's there and it's available to you, and you ask the Holy Spirit to give you understanding, He will. Seek, find, have a thirst to understand what His will is. And for me, understanding what His will is helps me understand my boundaries. I know what He say that I can't do in relationship with Him. That's a boundary that's set up for me. Well, I know what He tells me that in order for me to identify being His child, this is the behavior that I should see in you. That's a boundary that I have for myself as well, as far as my behavior. And protecting yourself from the hidden cost of negative relationships is when this is a negative relationship, you protect yourself and you don't enter into it. I mean, I'm not trying to make it simple, but I can truly say that since I have begun to do some professional and personal development, that I can identify behaviors very, very quickly. And that's in part because of the time that I've taken to go and begin to understand what God is saying to me and how I need to be in relationship with other people. Because how can we say we love Him whom we've never seen, but we can't love our brother and sister? We have to know who we are in relationship with. And if I can't go and filter what I am doing on my day-to-day basis in my life through the Word of God, then everything that I need, every instruction I need is there. Everything. Every decision I have to make about entering into business, personal relationships, everything is there. You identify them, you know them, and they don't line up with what you say you believe, then you make a decision from that point. And I'll stop there.
All right. I love it.
I would say one is a value-based boundary. Excuse me. The one that I had to learn for myself the most, because integrity is a core value. Never compromise yourself. Your integrity, your morals, your beliefs, your value system. If you find yourself walking down that street, cross it and walk back up. Okay, get to the other side, because truly, when you start compromising your values, you lose your identity and what it is with the Most High. In my situation, I would have to say. Also, set communication boundaries. Anytime the conversation is going left, you go right and say, you know what, I'm going to step away from this situation. And this is something I just picked up from you, Coach. I'm going to step away from this situation and we can come back later and revisit it, if time permits or if it's allowed by the other person. because you can't communicate with someone that's unwilling to communicate.
So just to add to what you were saying just now, I want everybody to hear this. Um, it's not a violent withdrawal. It is you two coming to an agreement that we're going to put this on the shelf for about 10 minutes so that cooler heads can prevail. Then we'll come back, right? It's a joint agreement. Then we'll come back and pick this back up to where we both calm down. That should be something that, like, that should be something that we discussed in the beginning. Do we have the ability to do that? Which kind of takes me to my response for this question here. I like to say, when it comes down to creating boundaries to protect myself from hidden costs of negative relationships, by first saying I don't protect myself from the hidden costs of negative relationships. That's where I would start at. What I do is I posture myself so that I become the vessel for great relationships to exist in. So now, what does that really mean? That means that I focus on a technique, what I call God ability, right? God ability. It's not saying that I am God. I recognize God ability. Go back and research the scriptures. The scripture says, let this mind be in you, the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, who viewed himself, who being made in the image of God, so forth and so on. I'm getting tongue tied. I'm gonna mess it up. But y'all know what I'm talking about. Everybody knew that that's who he was, but he humbled himself down to a man. Well, I'm not Christ. I'm not God, but I was made in his image after his likeness. And so ideally, I'm supposed to be a vessel for him. So what I focus on, right? This is where my boundary starts. I focus on reducing me so that he can be larger than life in me. I don't even want you to see me. I want you to see him in me. So now I become a vessel for his power, a vessel for his love, a vessel for all of those things, right? So the God ability means that he, number one, his son, Christ, is my number one priority. The relationship that I have with Christ is my number one thing. So if you can't accept that, then this conversation was easy. I'm just saying, that's the first question. If you can't accept the fact that he is number one, numero uno, and you will never be number one, conversation is easy. Bye. And be okay with that. I have no emotional ties with saying bye at that point. Okay? That's the first boundary of my life. That go for male and female alike. I'm not saying that we can't communicate. We ain't gonna be that, we just, we gotta keep that a little. I'm just being honest. I love y'all.
My husband, huh?
Yeah, keep little highs and you too close. Back up. I don't want what you got rubbing off on me. I'm joking when I say that. Y'all stop judging me. But seriously. But then from there, what's important to him is now important to me. And the reason why he has to be the number one relationship, because I cannot get to the Father except through the Son. Now, what's important is what's important to him is what's important to me. Well, what's important to him? You. So now when I understand that you're important to him, now you become number two. So again, if you can't be okay with being number two, bye. Right? And I have this thing. Y'all stop it. Stop it. Y'all cut it out. The best ability that you've been given falls in a couple of categories: availability, accessibility, and responsibility. Let me say that again: availability, accessibility, and responsibility. If I take those three things and make them mine, this is what I do. I make myself available to his children. I make myself accessible to the people who are not his children. And I become responsible only to him. Now I got it. Somebody heard that and they said, no. When you're married, you're responsible to your spouse. No, I'm not. I've just told y'all, in the space of relationship, I have a responsibility. The other person becomes the recipient of my obedience to that thing in which I'm responsible for. I am only responsible to him, his word, right? The covenant is with him. She becomes the recipient of my obedience with him, and vice versa. So now, when I understand that, absolutely, his divine appointment, hiding behind the cross. When I do that, right? See, when we start talking like this, the numbers go down. I think it's funny. When I do that, now what ends up happening is that, hey, all of the control, all of the yelling, all of the pessimism, all of the trauma, all of the past projected experiences, they go out the window. They have to. My experiences are for me. I can't hold you responsible for my experience. Here's the best part about it. As a person who already have pre-established boundaries, I ain't fixing to pick up your experience. Thank you for sharing. But what did you learn from that experience? What does that do in you now? And if we can do that, I think what ends up happening is that the environment for a relationship not only maintains its posture of being healthy, but in the space of relationship, both parties can thrive. Your thoughts?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. It's easy. It becomes so easy to make the decision when you identify, because you know your responsibility, because you've taken the time to understand the relationship that you're in with God and what He requires of you. So you entering into relationship, you already know your responsibilities. You already know your relationship and the covenant agreement that you made to be in relationship with Him, and nothing or no one can change that. If they don't, if you can't be on one accord, then okay, that's an easy decision. So I'm agreeing with you.
Um, Indeed. Indeed. Definitely my first priority is to the Most High. That's the first relationship that, excuse me, contrary to popular demand, that I truly have. Even though we say it's with our parents, but what's the flame that lives internally? There's still that flicker of light. Yes, they taught us a few things. However, my responsibility is to the Most High, and it's not to the, how we often say, the the enslavement of my responsibility that you think I have to take care of you and your notions, because I don't. So it took a long time to get there, but hey, we
We
still
we
working it out.
we gonna keep you at that orange jumpsuit. I promise. You just you
Community
stay.
is necessary. Please
There
keep
you
me
go.
out of the jumpsuit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to your point, one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is that when you become an adult, your parents become your brothers and your sisters. I get it. It don't feel good. It don't sound good, but it is. Now I still honor and respect him. That's again personal because of the relationship I have with him. And I want to go back and unpack them boundaries again, right? Because I think it's important. You become available to his children, his children. You become accessible to those who are not yet his children. All of that because you are responsible only to him. Because when I accept any other metric of responsibility, I am now in order. That's why you. That's why they were supposed to raise them up in the ways that they should go. Get out my house. I mean, I know that sounds rough. You got to go because the longer you stay in my house, the more you're under my rule. Oh, Christ, my servant has taken ill. Oh, I will come. No, no, because if you come to my house, now you're under my authority. No, just send the word, and they will be healed. Y'all come on over to Bible study on TikTok on the underscore mindset underscore coach. Come on over there. We have a good old time. 2 p.m. every Sunday, East 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to say that. The underscore. I'm sorry. Let me say it the right way because somebody say the THEE just now. The THE underscore mindset underscore coach. And just subscribe. Subscribe. That's where we do our Bible studies at. Every Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen, I love y'all. All y'all. I don't intend to ever offend anybody. Sometimes we got to understand the truth hurt. Don't hold me accountable to the truth. I just have a responsibility to him. And he told me I got to tell the truth. So if I tell the truth, y'all don't hate me for it. Just understand I honor my commitment. That's all it is. Is there anything else that you find young ladies would like to share with people before we go? Because we're at an hour and 30 minutes and I don't want to keep them much longer.
I think we should do a part two so we can add the family members and the children into this relationship conversation.
Oh, goodness.
I'm just saying.
It may need to be in it because they don't understand it yet.
Oh goodness.
But as long as we know our part, that's what matters.
I got
I
adult,
don't.
I got adult kids, and
Me too.
and see, I won't drop any inappropriate language, but
Mm.
it's forget them kids, okay? They're my own kids.
Well,
So
we
I
do.
need help all the way around in relationships. Let's
No,
just
no, no,
talk.
no, no. No, we can't forget them. We still got to advise them. That's what we're supposed to do. Still got to advise them. Lord help me. Um, Lisa, you got the thing. You got the orange jumpsuit, ma'am. Remember that.
Okay.
I want you
Oh,
to have that forethought I was talking about last night. I want that flash of that orange jumpsuit to jump in your eyes beforehand. Lisa, Keys, what you got?
no, I've just truly enjoyed the conversation. I have to save my thoughts for my final. Do you want me to do my final thoughts now? I can't.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to do any formal final thoughts because of
Okay.
the time. But if you have anything you want to share about it, go ahead.
No, I just, I'm. This is something that God is teaching me, and I always like to share because He teaches us for we can share the information with other people. And I'm sure it's not new information, but it's something that's become really impactful to me. When we learn that God has just given us everything, our children, our relationships, everything that we have, He's given it to us for a time, just for us to steward, right? Nothing belongs to us. And so when we're blessed with it, it's our responsibility to be good stewards over what He gave us. There's so many examples that you can see throughout His Word where that is an example that He is saying to us that this is my principle and this is what I want to bless you to do. And He's given us His authority. He has the power, but He's given us authority. He's given us. He says that everywhere our feet tread, is ours. He gave us peace. My peace I give unto you. My um His joy. All of those are gifts that He's given to us. Now, how do we steward what He's given to us? How do we continue to um be a blessing to the people who we're in community with? Like I think Coach or Miss Levant, the Love Doctor, was saying earlier that we can't find our identity in degrees, in things. We can't find our identity is not found there. Identity is found in Him who created us, the Creator. And so, one of the things I guess that I am so mindful of, hyper mindful of right now, is that everything that He's given me, even my business that I have, He's given it to me to be a good steward. Everything that our children, who, as Coach was saying, to advise them. Sometimes it's only when they ask for our advice. Sometimes we gotta let them go and figure it out. But they are our brothers and sisters, and so they're still gifts as well. And so for me, if I had to leave any final thoughts about being in a toxic environment, once we understand what God is telling us and the principles that He has given us to live by, we can create a healthy environment, and we don't have to stay in a toxic environment. And so I think those would be my final words. If you find yourself there, we have a community where we have professional, certified coaches, Coach Dwyer, who can be of assistance. He's been my coach for several years, and so I'm thankful for growing and learning. And it wasn't easy because I was fighting. The whole, when we first started, I was fighting, but the I did the work. I am still doing the work, so it never ends. And so I would say to you that if you find yourself in a place where you don't feel like you're at peace and you don't have the joy that God has given us freely, then talk to someone. And we're here in this community to be a help.
I thought we were doing final thoughts, so I did write down 5 steps
Okay.
really quick. I'll run through them. Reflect, identify the source of distress. 2, communicate, voice your concerns if it's safe. Number 3, seek support, therapy or community that like ours that Lisa spoke about. Number 4, set boundaries, protect your well-being with clear limits. Number 5, step away, make your well-being a priority, especially if it becomes harmful to your health. And last, your peace is your power. Choose what nourishes your soul and let go of the rest.
Well, well, well. Very well stated. Thank you so much, um, both of you, for what you said. I think they were powerful messages. And thank you guys for the community shout out. And again, I stress that. I think we do a lot in the community. And excuse me. And I appreciate all of it. I appreciate all of you. As I so often tell you guys, I appreciate everybody who joins us whenever we go live, whether it's on Saturday mornings, whether it's on Sunday on TikTok Live, or Sunday doing Bible study, whether it's Tuesday doing Coach's Corner, or Friday doing the Hearts of Men. We greatly appreciate you guys' commitment to what we do. And it is only my prayer that we can be of value and service to you. You don't just show up, right? When you show up, I'm hoping to give you something. It is my desire for you to never walk away empty-handed. And if it ever comes to that point to where I feel that you're not growing, you're stagnant, I take it personal. Even though there's another side of that coin that says that you have a responsibility for your own development, I take it personal. So I go back to the drawing board and see what more can we do. I get on my knees and pray and say, Father, what more would you have me to do? Because I think that's the right posture to take. And that same posture is the same posture that we should take in every relationship that we find ourselves in. What more can I do, Father? What more would you have me to do? So, that being said, again, thank you guys for joining us. Again, share this replay with somebody else, somebody who you think you'll find value in it. And just know that we do this conversation on the fourth Saturday of every month. The third Saturday of every month is the Hearts of Women. And again, every Friday night is the Hearts of Men. We're going to get the women to commit to more than one Saturday. I'm just putting that out there. So listen, you guys be awesome, be blessed. Understand that through Him, nothing is impossible. So enjoy your Saturday. Let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else, and we will see you soon.